was a young man with big plans for the future.
International banking, that was his goal. Anything he was focused on, he was gonna accomplish it.
But his plans took a tragic and mysterious turn.
It looks like a body.
There was a plastic bag found around the head.
He was wrapped in a blanket and left in this hotel room.
The truth behind his death will reveal just how far some people will go when the bonds of love are put to the test.
He was spiraling down into this out-of-control lifestyle where it ultimately leads to his murder.
You want to keep an eye out for those in the person's life that might have that sort of rage inside of them.
I don't think he fully understood the type of person that he was getting involved with. I've been a criminal for a long time.
He was just kind of head over heels for him.
He was the type of person to feel like he would probably save people, try to change them to be a better person.
He kind of turned a blind eye to the dangers.
January 31st, 2015, 12 p.m. It's a typical Saturday afternoon in the bustling city of Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta has a population of about 6 million people. It's a diverse population. It's a city that experienced a lot of growth.
It's a city that has really thrived. A city that is known to offer just wonderful opportunities to anyone who comes here.
But over in Midtown, a hotel manager has just discovered something unusual in a guest's room.
They were checking out yesterday, so we went to check it today. And something looks really weird.
What she finds is what appears to be something large wrapped up in a blanket and 2 plastic bags on the side of this large object.
It almost looks like a body. I don't want to uncover it. I'm scared. It looks like a body, but I don't know.
She don't really want to tamper with it. It's just a really kind of eerie scene.
Moments later, officers arrive at the hotel. They quickly confirm that the hotel manager's instincts were correct.
Atlanta police was soon able to determine that it was the body of a black male.
It was just suspicious in nature, a male rolled up in a comforter and trash bags.
How the man died isn't immediately clear.
You couldn't really tell what happened to him just by making a visual observation.
No gunshot wound, no stab injuries. That was our big mystery.
The manager IDs the victim as one of the hotel's occupants.
She gave his name of Corey Robinson.
Macon, Georgia native Corey Robinson attracted attention everywhere he went.
Everybody loved Corey. I know it's so cliche, you hear people say that all the time, but Corey could walk in a room, you would notice him. Like, who is that?
Corey had a personality that just drawed you to him.
Good morning.
He was a very popular guy at a young age, very fashionable.
In addition to his style and good looks, Corey was especially known for his kindness.
He had a big heart, bigger than anybody.
He would give you the clothes up his back. He literally done that.
Anytime somebody was in some kind of situation, he was there to help. He may not even have anything to give you, but he would probably be there mentally or for moral support.
Despite Corey's popularity around town, he still felt like something was missing.
He had great dreams and aspirations for the future.
He wanted to see something different, experience things that you couldn't experience in Macon.
After graduating with an associate's degree in 2012, Corey decided to continue his education at Kennesaw State University.
He said he wanted to be an international banker. He was going to own his own $1 million company, and he was going to take care of everybody. He was just that type of person. He set his mind to something, he's going to do it.
With Kennesaw State University located in the heart of Atlanta, Corey excelled in the energetic city and quickly felt at home.
I was nervous because I told him, I said, that's that fast city life. And he used to tell me, Mom, you got to let me grow up. He was excited. That's all he talked about. He loved Atlanta. He had friends up there. He just loved Atlanta area, and he loved Kennesaw because it was so diverse. and he met a lot of different people.
It's a melting pot in Atlanta, so it was kind of a clean slate. The time for him to just become the person that he wanted to be.
And one person who helped Corey discover his true identity was longtime friend Vic Glass.
Vic was originally from Macon as well. He'd known Corey since they were 15.
He was like, you can stay with us. It was like 4 or 5 of them staying together. It was 2 girls and 3 guys. They had an apartment.
But soon, Corey's friendship with Vic evolved into something more.
I knew years ago that he was gay. He told me. So I had already known, but he hadn't told my mom because we have family as well as we know people that are just judgmental and don't accept things like that.
Living in Atlanta, it felt like that type of lifestyle was much more common and people were much more accepting.
He really was embracing this new relationship, really embarking on new endeavors, and it just seemed like he was on and up and up.
But now, less than a year after Corey's move to Atlanta, police believe they found his dead body in a Midtown hotel.
It was wrapped in a blanket lying on the floor of the hotel room.
The officer backs away, secures the crime scene, and calls homicide, and starts the ball rolling without crime scene.
As detectives arrive, they get the lay of the land from first responders.
What we got here?
A younger black male in his early 20s.
Any idea on the body?
Got a tentative ID from the manager. She's waiting for you guys at the front desk.
We went to the front desk, see if they had the information on who rented the room, who paid for it.
Thank you, officer. We'll take it from here.
The manager on staff gave us the name of Corey Robinson.
They find out that he's been living there for, the past month, and this is actually the day that he was scheduled to check out.
Did you notice any unusual activity in the past few days in that room? Anything suspicious?
Suspicious? No. But he was clearly packing up.
One key factor that staff notify the officers about is they noticed that the occupant was going in and out, loading things into a U-Haul truck.
But it's what the manager says next that could break the case wide open.
She told us that right before she goes into that room, she sees the U-Haul truck drive away.
That means whoever was in that truck probably knew what happened and why.
That's obviously a big lead that we need to jump on.
After moving to Atlanta, 22-year-old college student Corey Robinson seemed like he had finally discovered a place where he could be his true self.
Atlanta has a lot of gay men. I think he probably felt more comfortable versus here in Macon, you have a lot of judgmental people, lots of them.
He had really come into his own and started embracing everything about himself.
But now detectives believe they have found Corey's dead body in a Midtown hotel room.
It seemed like foul play was involved.
The body in the comforter and the trash bags obviously drew attention.
Detectives have just learned that someone was seen driving off in the victim's U-Haul just minutes before the body was found.
The manager wasn't able to get a good look at him.
One of the benefits of this hotel is that they have surveillance video.
So obviously that's kind of important to us.
Can you get us that footage?
Sure.
Though the manager never saw who was behind the wheel of the truck, she informs detectives that she frequently saw Corey with another man around the hotel.
She described them in a relationship, so we had every reason to believe they were living there together.
She didn't know the mystery man's name.
Nobody else's name is listed on the hotel information sheet as to who was renting the room.
But before they ID the man in the U-Haul, detectives must confirm the identity of their victim.
The only personal effects they found in the room was a backpack that had a sheet of paper with a phone number inside.
Hello, this is Detective Smith with Atlanta Police Department.
They called me and said Corey was found dead because he was trying to locate the family and they couldn't find any identification. It didn't seem real. I'm like, no, they can't be Corey. They must got him mixed up with somebody else. It can't be him. My mind is all over the place because it's like, well, I haven't heard from him, so it could possibly be true. But then it's like, no, Corey's not dead.
But to the family's dismay, a picture confirms their worst fears.
They sent me a picture of him, and I said, like, yeah, that's him. That's him. I had to catch her. She almost hit the floor. It was horrible.
With Corey's family still reeling from the shock, detectives start by looking around the room for additional clues.
Corey had been seen the night before loading up a U-Haul truck with boxes from his hotel room.
That U-Haul truck was seen leaving the hotel 5 to 6 minutes before the staff found Corey Robinson inside the room.
Detectives believe the driver could be the man Corey was living with in the hotel. There's just one problem. Nobody knows who he is.
There were no receipts, there was nothing with a credit card number or anything that could lead detectives to the other man's identity.
However, once crime scene investigators begin processing the scene, they discover that Corey's guest may have left something behind after all.
When we processed the hotel room, we got a latent fingerprint off the TV. So we wanted to jump on that and see if we could get a match, at least a direction to go in, maybe fill in some of the gaps and questions that I had.
Starting with exactly how Corey died.
It was odd. Either this was a murder or this was some type of death where someone was trying to cover up a body and then just head out. That's what it looked like to us.
They don't see any signs of injuries.
The hotel room didn't appear to me that it was ransacked at all. It didn't really look like a robbery to me. So running through my mind, was this a drug overdose where the people in here were scared, they didn't know what to do, so they were trying to hide the body?
The following morning, as detectives wait for the fingerprint results to come back, the autopsy report comes in, and what it reveals is telling.
It was positive for cocaine.
But his death was no overdose.
The victim in this case, Corey Robinson, was murdered.
There was some bruising around the inner tissue, muscles around the neck, an indication that there was some type of strangulation.
Now that detectives are 100% sure they are dealing with a homicide, can they identify a possible suspect?
During autopsy, they had clipped his fingernail, did some scrapings for us, and we got that all sent down to the crime lab.
A strangulation is a violent and very personal way to murder someone. It's not a quick thing.
Unfortunately, the DNA from Corey's fingernails do not provide a match in their database.
They needed to find a suspect for comparison if they were going to identify who it belonged to.
Next, detectives focus their efforts on the U-Haul rental.
We contacted U-Haul with Corey Robinson's information, and they weren't able to come back with any truck that had been rented by a Corey Robinson anywhere in the metro area of Atlanta.
However, the fingerprint lifted from the hotel's TV could finally be the break detectives need.
There's a match.
Detectives were able to link the fingerprint to a man named Tim Barker, who had an extensive criminal record, mostly drug possession and trafficking charges.
Did he get in with the wrong crowd, the wrong guys?
Maybe he had involved himself in something and it was too late to turn back.
Love scattered everywhere.
When he looked at me, I just melted.
Dreams so sweet turned into a nightmare.
I didn't suspect that he was a straight-out killer demon. I knew I was in trouble. That's a hell of a price to pay. Just for one damn man.
Corey was up at the hotel first part of January. Everybody was doing drugs. So I think there was a lot of that activity going on, and somebody introduced him to this lifestyle. And at one point, Corey was like, I gotta get out of this situation. This isn't me. I didn't come up here to Atlanta to do this. He was a good kid, but he got steered in the wrong direction.
Less than 48 hours after a hotel manager found 22-year-old Corey Robinson dead in an Atlanta hotel room, detectives have discovered what appears to be their first promising lead.
A fingerprint found inside the hotel room belonged to a man named Tim Barker, who had a long history of drug possession and trafficking charges.
Tim's extensive record leaves detectives wondering if Corey's murder could be connected to something bigger.
Prior to his murder, hotel staff had seen Corey loading boxes into a rental truck, which was now missing.
So just what was in those boxes? Was it possible that Corey had gotten caught up in a drug ring? Could that have something to do with his death?
Looking for answers, detectives bring Tim Barker in for questioning.
Do you know Corey Robinson?
Yeah. We met about 3 weeks ago. Friend took me over to a hotel room for his party.
A party?
Yeah. Got kind of wild.
He said they were doing drugs and all this stuff, and everybody was doing drugs that night.
He went on to say how common these parties were and how wild and crazy they could get.
Detectives wonder if all the drugs and partying could have led to Corey's death.
He was found dead in that hotel room.
Whoa. What are you getting at?
You never went back to that hotel after that party 3 weeks ago.
No. I was out of town. Just got back yesterday.
Can anyone vouch for that?
Tim said that he had taken a flight out of town, and they could check with the airline to prove it.
When detectives followed up on Barker's story, it appeared to check out.
With Tim Barker a dead end, detectives contact the names of Tim's friends who were also at the party. But those two lead nowhere.
Excuse me.
Fortunately, they don't have to wait long for their next lead.
A friend of Corey's named Alex came forward and wanted to share some information with detectives.
Once I heard that he died, I thought I should come talk to you.
How'd you hear about Corey's death?
His ex-boyfriend, Vic.
Wait, ex-boyfriend?
Detectives wonder, could Vic have been the man seen living with Corey at the hotel? And perhaps even the person seen driving the U-Haul away moments before Corey was found.
Do you think Vic had anything to do with Corey's death?
Vic? No. Vic's a sweetheart. It's this new guy that he had been seeing. There's something strange about him.
On a couple of separate occasions, Corey got delivered a bouquet of flowers, I think like 3 on one day.
I mean, flowers are nice, but this guy just went a little overboard.
You know this guy's name?
Corey just called him Ace.
Hoping to learn more, detectives follow up with Corey's ex-boyfriend, Vic Glass.
Vic, I know I should have called earlier, but I've been in shock ever since the sister called and told me what happened.
While Vic's grief appears genuine, detectives can't help but wonder if Vic had gotten wind of Corey's new man and killed him in a jealous rage.
Did you have anything to do with Corey's death?
What? No, I would never hurt Corey. We go back years. It didn't work out between us, but I would never hurt him.
So where were you on the night of the 30th?
At home, alone.
So no one can verify your alibi?
No, but I would never hurt him.
He'd known Corey since they were 15.
Vic was adamant he would never hurt Corey, despite their recent breakup.
According to Vic, Corey had moved out of their shared apartment about a month before.
Vic said that's how Corey ended up at the hotel. It was supposed to be just temporary.
He was staying in a hotel just waiting for campus housing to become available.
Why did you guys break up?
We both were just going in different directions. You know, better friends and lovers, I guess.
For what I understand, there was a mutual breakup between the two of them.
It didn't appear to detectives that there was any real motive on Vic's part. He wanted to be as helpful as possible.
Did you know a guy that he was dating named Ace?
I met him a couple times.
Ace had been over to Vic's place to help Corey get some belongings that he had left over there.
That's the last time I saw him.
He was aware of this Ace. He had seen him before, and he was familiar with this new relationship.
Unfortunately, Vic doesn't know Ace's last name or where to find him.
Ace? That's all he knew him by?
With nothing to hold him on, detectives ask one more question before they let him go.
Would it be all right if we take a sample of your DNA?
Of course. I don't have nothing to hide.
The following morning, detectives drive to Macon to meet with Corey's mother, Carletta Davis.
Do you know if Corey had any enemies?
No. Everybody loved Corey. I just don't understand why someone would do this to him.
Well, talking to his mother, he was a pretty good kid. Enjoyed life. Was happy. Always got along with everybody.
He would help anyone if he could.
However, it's soon clear to detectives that Corey may have kept some secrets from his mother.
According to our investigation, he'd been living with another man, Vic Glass.
Yes, sir. They've been knowing each other for years. They went to school together.
Did he ever mention why he moved out?
Said, well, I moved out of there because him and the girl that was living there didn't get along.
This was at odds with what Vic had told detectives, that Corey had moved out when they broke up.
To detectives, it seems Carletta isn't aware of her son's romantic relationship with Vic.
He was going to talk with my mom and let her know about some things that she didn't know. And it was coming up, but he just never got the chance to do it. But he wanted to talk with her. He knew she wasn't going to push him away. I mean, she loved Corey. After he died, then it came out, and I was like, you should have came to me way before now. I wish you had told me.
Detectives asked Carletta if Corey had ever mentioned someone named Ace.
They were roommates. That's all he said. He said, we were roommates.
Detectives suspect Ace was the man hotel staff had seen Corey with in the weeks leading up to his murder. And what Carletta says next furthers their suspicions.
He was having issues. He didn't like his attitude. He was tired of fussing and arguing with him.
Do you know what they were fighting about?
No.
According to Carletta, Corey had decided to move out and come back home for a while.
I said, well, Corey, pack your stuff and come on. I said, do you need me to come get you? And he said, no, I have a U-Haul.
Whatever was going on up there, whatever situation he was in was to the point where I need to come back to Finley and maybe start over.
But was Corey's change of heart too little, too late?
He was blinded by love.
It seemed like he saw the signs and was trying to escape, but just didn't get out soon enough.
February 4th, 2015. It's been 4 days since 22-year-old Corey Robinson was found dead in a hotel room. Desperate for a fresh lead in the case, detectives are meeting with Corey's family in Macon, Georgia. But so far, they've come up empty-handed.
He didn't share his personal life with me.
You might want to ask Courtney, because she may know more. They were very close.
Hoping for more insight, detectives turn to Corey's sister, Courtney.
We shared a lot of things. He would come and talk to me about a lot of things that people don't know.
She was aware that he was gay.
So, you knew about Ace?
Yeah, I met him one time.
It was around Thanksgiving, and they actually went down to visit.
According to Courtney, Ace was extremely jealous.
Corey could be speaking to somebody, and he would get upset.
Who was that?
A guy from class. We were talking about school.
That's all you better be doing.
Was he ever violent?
Not that I'm aware of, but I just didn't have a good feeling about the guy.
Why is that?
Well, for one thing, he told me he'd been in jail.
He had just gotten out a few months before him and Corey met, but he had never go in detail of what he had actually done to have served any jail time.
Courtney also recounts an incident that happened just a month before the murder.
I'll never forget, it was actually on Christmas Day. They both were supposed to be coming to my mom's house for Christmas because we always gathered there for Christmas holidays.
Corey told his sister they'd stopped for gas when they left Atlanta and had gotten into a fight.
It wasn't a physical confrontation, but it was an argument.
Get out my damn car! What? Yo! Get the hell out! Fine.
He left him at a gas station in Atlanta, no transportation, just left him.
Did he ever tell you what they were fighting about?
No, we didn't want to talk about it.
With a jealous new boyfriend, it seems to detectives Corey's tumultuous love life had likely gotten him killed.
He wasn't as happy like he used to be, and I knew something was wrong.
Based on a lot of what Courtney had told me, Corey made the decision to move, to pack up and move back to Macon.
We spoke with him that Friday. He sounded upbeat. Like, yeah, I'm coming home tomorrow. I'll be back Saturday morning. Nothing sounded off. He sounded like he was ready to come home.
However, less than 24 hours later, Corey was dead.
Ace obviously is looking more of a suspect now.
But without Ace's last name, detectives are at an impasse. That is, until Courtney recalls the name of one of Ace's friends.
His sister had this information, potentially a name that we could look up.
Courtney identifies Ace's friend as 24-year-old Stanley Harrison.
We're able to pop Stanley into our database and get back some decent information, potential address where he could live, and obviously we need to go talk to Stanley, see what information he may or may not have for us on this case.
Stanley Harrison?
Yeah?
I'm Detective Smith with the Atlanta PD.
I introduced myself, told him I was working the case. I didn't come out and say murder in the beginning, because you just don't blurt that out in the beginning.
Is there some kind of problem?
I told him we were investigating an incident that happened about the Edentown Suites. The family had given me some information and said I should talk to you, that you may be able to provide some information to us.
Sure, whatever you need.
Do you know a Corey Robinson?
Yeah, one of Ace's friends.
According to Stanley, he and Ace had been friends for years.
They were fairly good friends. They met at a juvenile facility back in their youth. I think they just kind of clicked.
What was he in for?
I mean, nothing much, some small stuff.
He had embarked on a series of petty crimes: burglary, stealing his mother's purse, even the theft of his mother's car.
But what detectives really want to know is Ace's last name.
Stanley gave us the name of Richard Williams.
It seems Ace was just a nickname Richard used.
Do you know where we can find him?
I mean, you can start at the hotel. He's been staying with Corey lately.
Eventually, I had to tell him Corey was dead.
Dead?
He kind of lost it.
I should have known the moment I saw him laying there.
You saw him?
Yeah.
He had said he'd seen him a couple of days ago. He had gone up to the hotel room.
He describes receiving a text message from Richard Williams, where Richard is telling him to come over to the hotel.
Richard had asked him to help move and pack some stuff.
Stanley tells detectives that when he got to the room, Corey was face down on the couch.
So with Corey?
He's not moving, he's not talking.
You know Corey, high ass.
Stanley didn't think anything of it. Told us that they had done drugs together.
You didn't suspect anything?
No, I thought he was just passed out.
Stanley said he was so sure that Corey was just passed out that he decided to mess with his friend a little.
What the hell are you doing?
What?
Stop playing, man. Get this box. Let's go.
Stanley wanted to take a picture with him. Richard is like, man, I ain't going to jail for that.
And that didn't make you suspicious?
No, I mean, that's just Richard. I mean, he's always being dramatic.
Uh-huh.
Detectives are skeptical. How could someone see a dead body and not realize it?
I believe he was being a little deceitful. I think he's hiding something.
Look, if we find out you're not telling the truth, you're going to be facing charges.
No, I swear, I'm not lying. Richard, he just wasn't the same after that.
Stanley describes going back to his residence, which wasn't too far from where the hotel was. He says that next day, Richard comes over to his house and brings a bag.
Stanley just happened to still have the bag, too.
Richard gave you this?
Yeah. I mean, he gave it to me to hold on to.
We took the bag, went through it. There was some clothing. There was some prescription bottles with Corey Robinson's name on it. Medication bottles.
I mean, I assumed that it was just clothes and some other small things, considering he doesn't have his own home, so I didn't think much of it.
Stanley continues to plead his innocence and stands by his story that Corey was dead when he got there. But detectives aren't so sure.
Would you, be willing to let us take a sample of your DNA?
Mine? For what? I didn't do it.
Stanley Harrison put himself at that location. You had to consider the possibility that Stanley Harrison was involved in the murder.
Harrison has just identified Corey Robinson's mysterious ex-boyfriend Ace as 26-year-old Richard Williams. But the more detectives learn from Stanley, the more they wonder if he could be an accomplice to Corey's murder.
There were things about Stanley's story that just didn't add up.
Could have just been Stanley went up. They hung out for a few hours. He saw Corey sitting there, and that's it. He might have done nothing, but I just have a hard time believing that.
We had to consider the possibility that there were some relationships between Stanley and Corey, Richard and Corey, and possibly the three of them. We had to consider that.
While detectives are suspicious of Stanley's involvement, Their first priority is finding Richard Ace Williams.
He popped up a few times in our database.
He had served part of a 3-year prison sentence for a massive theft and fraud scheme.
However, there's nothing in his record that suggests he's a killer.
There was no violent crime that I noticed in there. There was nothing that indicated he had done something like this before.
But Richard's record does suggest that tracking him down won't be easy.
This is someone who knows how to cover his identity. He knows how to cover his tracks.
To find him, Atlanta detectives turn to the U.S. Marshal Service for assistance.
They're probably the best group of guys I've seen tracking somebody down.
The manhunt for Richard Williams is especially hard on Corey's family.
It was very scary because at that time I'm like, I don't know what mind frame he's in. I don't know if he's gonna come and try to harm me or Courtney, because we knew he was on the run and nobody knew where he was.
A week into their search, U.S. Marshals find their first lead, the missing U-Haul truck.
The U-Haul truck is found in Savannah.
U.S. Marshals also confirm the truck had been rented to Richard Williams. And based on Richard's cell phone records, detectives are now certain he was the one driving the truck minutes before Corey's body was found.
Richard's cell phone records and his movements corresponded with when the U-Haul truck came and left the hotel.
However, a thorough search of the truck leads to another dead end.
Everything that was loaded on that truck was gone.
For weeks, Richard's trail goes cold.
At this point, it's like, are they ever gonna find him? I didn't really sleep. I stayed on Instagram and Facebook looking for signs of him talking to someone.
While marshals continue the manhunt, detectives receive forensic reports that have just ruled out their other two suspects.
Police find skin fragments of someone's DNA under the fingernails of Corey Robinson.
They compared that to the DNA they've collected from Corey's ex-boyfriend, Vic Glass, and Stanley Harrison, Richard's friend.
The testing determines the DNA was not a match for either man.
That pointed back in the direction of Richard Williams.
Unfortunately, they'll have to wait to find out for sure.
Richard's juvenile records were sealed, so they couldn't compare his DNA to the fingernail sample until he was in custody.
Finally, on April 1st, 2 months after Corey was found murdered, U.S. Marshals tracked down their fugitive.
They received a tip. Richard Williams was at that hotel using an alias. They didn't announce themselves as fugitive task force officers when they were knocking on his door. They were dressed in SWAT gear.
What is it?
And when he saw that, his reaction was to try to close the door.
But he's quickly subdued by the marshals.
They arrest Richard Williams on a charge of felony murder.
I'll never forget that phone call. That was like the best news that we had heard. I just screamed. That's all I can do.
While Corey's family rejoices, Detective Smith sits down with Richard Ace Williams at the precinct.
Oh my God, that was an interesting interview.
When asked about Corey, Richard doesn't deny their relationship.
Me and Corey, we were kind of exclusive for a little while.
Richard doesn't deny being in Corey's hotel room on January 31st either.
He made some slight admissions. I saw him the morning that he died.
I bought him something to eat, and I let him. When he left, he was still alive. Yeah! Yeah, he was alive.
He says he had nothing to do with Corey's murder.
To detectives, Richard's demeanor doesn't suggest that of a grieving ex. Not to mention, if he was innocent, why go on the run?
They just didn't buy his story.
2 months into the murder investigation of Corey Robinson, Atlanta detectives have narrowed in on their prime suspect, Richard Ace Williams.
Richard tells officers he did see Corey on the day of, January 31st, but he had nothing to do with Corey's murder.
The last time I saw him, he was alive. Yeah.
Detectives don't believe a word of it.
He admitted to seeing Corey the day of the murder.
So with Corey?
Man, you know Corey. High ass.
He had given his friend Corey's personal belongings.
Richard gave you this? Yeah. He gave it to me to hold on to.
His cell phone records matched the path of the U-Haul that had driven away just minutes before Corey's body was found. Everything was pointing to Richard at this point.
I don't think he was ever gonna flat out confess to it and give us details.
I am not a killer. I do not kill people. I killed him just as dead as can be. You took that poor kid from his family, his mother, because you were pissed at him because he was moving back.
Detectives tell Richard, straight up, we think that you two got in a fight.
I don't know what may have set it off because he was supposed to be moving Corey home.
You don't have to leave. You can take that truck, go anywhere.
Detectives believe Richard tried to convince Corey to stay.
It's over.
And that's when Richard spun into a jealous rage.
It's not over until I say it's over, okay?
Corey was like, no, I gotta go, this is over. He's like, I'm not having it. He just choked him.
And before you know it, it's not like everything anymore.
Everything turns on power and control. Corey was going to leave Richard. Richard couldn't take it because he had built this relationship on power and control.
Oh my God, you was crazy, man. If you really think I strangled somebody, I ain't got that in me. I can't strangle nobody.
But detectives don't need Richard's confession.
Well, wait a minute. I'm going to search warrant for you, DNA.
We got a warrant, and then we got a people swab from him.
Open up what?
We sent that down to GBI's crime lab.
Crime lab technicians compare Richard's sample with the DNA found under Corey's fingernails.
The match was 100%. And I knew for sure then it was him.
So I'm like, we're good, we're golden. This is the evidence that's gonna put this overwhelmingly over the top. This is the guy.
With the DNA evidence ruling out any other possible suspects, Richard is officially charged with murder.
In March 2016, the trial for Richard Williams gets underway.
He certainly had a swagger to him. He put off an image like nothing was going to bother him.
During the whole trial, he played, laughed and talked to his lawyer and just like it was a little game. And it hurt because I'm like, he's not even taking it serious.
In their opening statement, prosecutors turned Richard's confidence against him.
Prosecution painted Richard as an aggressive, abusive lover. And once Corey decided to leave the relationship, he just couldn't handle it.
Prosecutors also had the testimony of Stanley, who put Richard at the hotel room when Corey died, and the U-Haul rental in his name, which was seen leaving the hotel right before Corey's body was found.
The cell phone evidence was pretty damning, too. They tracked him leaving the hotel and traveling to Savannah, where the U-Haul was eventually found.
However, all of that pales in comparison to the fact that Corey had Richard's DNA under his fingernails.
We have physical evidence to show that we got the right guy.
When it's the defense's turn, they do their best to cast doubt on the prosecution's DNA claims.
The defense's explanation for that was that Corey Robinson and Richard Williams had engaged in sexual intercourse close in time to when the body of Corey Robinson was found, and they scratched each other, and that's how that happened.
But will it be enough to sway the jury?
The jury came back and found him guilty. He was sentenced to life.
I love the fact that he got life. I want him to be able to sit there every day and think about what he did to this sweet angel that you took away from us.
It's not just the loss of the person you knew, it's the loss of who he was going to become and what he wanted to be.
All because one man couldn't let go.
I don't think Richard wanted to let him go. I think he felt he had control over him, that he was in control of the situation.
He wanted to be in control of everything. He wanted them to do what he wanted them to do.
Power and control is so much a part of the abuser's ego and who they are.
And when they see that slipping away, this veneer they have about themselves falls away and they reveal themselves. It shows who Richard really was.
It's a senseless crime with more than one victim.
The true tragedy is that his mother is without a son, and his sister, they were really close. She doesn't have the benefit of continuing on through life with her brother.
I just miss Corey, period. Everything that Corey was about.
Just came from the spot. I miss those laughs. I miss those conversations. I miss the singing. The years come, it's flying by, but it still feels like it was yesterday. I miss his sweet smile and his big hugs. He'll always be my heart, and I love him. I love him no matter what.
Line in her final note as a dying declaration of intent. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. On July 12, 2006, they returned with a verdict of guilty, considering her severe physical limitations resulting from her self-inflicted injuries. The jury chose to spare her the death penalty, sentencing her instead to 62 years in prison.
It
was a tragic conclusion to a relationship consumed by the destructive force of unchecked jealousy. The final chapter of this somber journey brings us to the suburbs of Houston, Texas, in the spring of 2007, where a young woman's bright aspirations were met with an unspeakable act of malice. Tanisha Stewart was a 19-year-old college freshman who represented the very best of her family's hopes. Raised in a challenging neighborhood in Houston, Tanisha had lost her father at a young age. Despite these difficulties, she excelled academically, demonstrating a fierce determination to succeed.
She
was known for her brilliant smile, her sharp intellect, and her independent
spirit.
Her hard work was rewarded when she received a full academic scholarship to Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. Her family was immensely proud, viewing her as a bright light destined for great achievements. In May of 2005, while working a part-time job at a local pizza establishment, Tanisha met Timothy Shepard, a coworker who was 25 years old. Despite the 8-year age difference, Timothy was persistent, and Tanisha eventually agreed to go out with him. Initially, Timothy was attentive and helpful, frequently visiting Tanisha's family and offering assistance around the house. The family welcomed him, viewing him as a mature, responsible influence in Tanisha's life. However, when Tanisha moved to the university campus, 2 hours away in College Station, the dynamics of their relationship began to shift. Tanisha thrived in the academic environment, embracing her independence, meeting new friends, and focusing on her future. Timothy struggled with the distance and her growing independence, becoming increasingly possessive and controlling. He made frequent, unannounced visits to the campus, demanding her attention and expressing intense jealousy. During her spring break in March of 2007, Tanisha returned to Houston. She spent time with her family and planned to attend a concert with her friends. On Sunday, March 18th, when Tanisha failed to show up for the concert and could not be reached by phone, her sister Gayla Taylor grew deeply concerned. Tanisha was highly responsible and never went out of contact. When Gayla contacted Timothy, He claimed he had not seen Tanisha since Thursday morning. He stated they had argued about a phone call she received from a male college friend, Mark Marks, and that Tanisha had simply walked out of his apartment. A missing persons report was filed on Monday, March 19th. Investigators focused their attention on the last two individuals to see her, Timothy Shepard and Mark Marks. Mark Marks cooperated fully with detectives. He explained that he and Tanisha had recently begun dating and that she had expressed a desire to end her relationship with Timothy. Mark possessed a verified alibi, having been away with friends at South Padre Island during the time of her disappearance, and was quickly cleared of any involvement. Timothy also cooperative initially, providing consent for investigators to search his apartment. The initial search yielded no immediate physical evidence of a crime, and with no legal basis to hold him, Timothy was released. As the days passed with no sign of Tanisha, community anxiety began to rise. Neighborhood tip led search teams to a wooded area near Timothy's apartment complex after a resident reported hearing potential gunshots on the night of the disappearance. Although search dogs were deployed, they discovered only the remains of a deceased animal. However, neighbors near Timothy's apartment soon reported highly unusual activity. In the days following Tanisha's disappearance, Timothy had been observed operating 2 outdoor grills continuously for nearly 3 days, producing an immense amount of smoke that had prompted a call to the fire department. Furthermore, a neighbor reported seeing Timothy washing his patio with a massive quantity of bleach, the scent of which was overwhelmingly strong. With suspicion mounting but direct evidence still lacking, Tanisha's family reached out to Quan Nell X, a prominent community activist known for his ability to facilitate communication between suspect individuals and law enforcement. Quan Nell, who had also been contacted by Timothy's family, arranged a private meeting with Timothy at his apartment. During their emotional and tense conversation, Quan Nell pressed Timothy to be honest. Timothy broke down, admitting that during a confrontation regarding her relationship with Mark Marks, he had flown into a violent rage and strangled Tanisha to death. He claimed he had subsequently placed her body in a dumpster at his apartment complex. Quan Nell immediately contacted investigator Sidney Miller. Accompanied by Timothy, detectives rushed to the specified dumpster, only to discover it had been emptied earlier that morning. The waste had already been transported to a massive regional landfill. Given the immense size of the facility and the prohibitive cost of a manual search, recovering her remains from the landfill proved impossible. However, a secondary, highly detailed forensic search of Timothy's apartment revealed a far more horrifying reality. Forensic technicians recovered tiny enamel fragments from the kitchen garbage disposal, which were later matched to Tanisha's dental records. Outside, near the area where Timothy had been grilling, investigators discovered several small, charred bone fragments. The investigation revealed a deeply disturbing truth. Timothy had not simply disposed of her body in a dumpster in an attempt to completely destroy the physical evidence of his crime. He had dismembered her remains, utilizing his outdoor smoker to incinerate them over several days. Timothy Shepard was formally indicted for first-degree murder. The trial commenced in September of 2008. The prosecution presented a powerful circumstantial case, anchoring their arguments on the dental evidence recovered from the disposal, the testimony of Quannell X, and the accounts of his unusual grilling activities. Furthermore, the prosecution called Timothy's cousin, Nicholas Shepard, to the stand. Nicholas testified that Timothy had previously made chilling statements, suggesting that if Tanisha ever attempted to leave him, he would kill her and destroy her body by boiling or burning it. In a final attempt to mitigate the charges, Timothy took the stand in his own defense during the sentencing phase. He claimed that Tanisha had attacked him with a knife during their argument and that he had acted in self-defense, experiencing a temporary blackout during the struggle. However, the sheer horror of his actions following her death completely alienated the jury. When asked directly about his actions with her remains, Timothy corrected the prosecutor, clarifying that he had used a smoker rather than a standard grill. The jury remained resolute. Timothy Shepard was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 99 years in prison, ensuring he would spend the remainder of his life behind bars. These three tragic cases, though distinct in their locations and details, share a common, sobering thread. They serve as profound reminders of the devastating consequences of unchecked obsession, jealousy, and the tragic loss of young lives filled with promise. Through the dedicated efforts of law enforcement, forensic scientists, and vigilant community members, justice was ultimately secured, honoring the memory of those who were so unjustly taken. Chapter 1. In the middle of March in the year 2007, a quiet stretch of highway north of Houston, Texas, became the starting point of a journey into the darkest corners of human jealousy. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon on Wednesday, March 21st, casting long, modern shadows across the pavement. Inside a plain, unmarked police vehicle, investigator Sidney Miller and his partner sat in quiet contemplation. The atmosphere inside the car was tense, heavy with the sort of silence that only accumulates when investigators are chasing the faint, cold trail of a missing person. In the back seat of the vehicle sat two passengers whose presence was both a necessity and a source of profound unease. They were providing directions, guiding the officers turn by turn off the main highway and toward an apartment complex nestled in a sprawling residential suburb. The target of their search was 19-year-old Tanisha Stewart, a young woman who had not been seen or heard from since the 15th of March, 6 days prior. Tanisha was a young woman of exceptional promise, a bright and shining star in the eyes of everyone who knew her. To her family, she was the child destined to break through the systemic barriers of her upbringing. Growing up as one of 6 children in one of the more challenging neighborhoods of Houston. She had suffered the loss of her father at a very tender age. Yet, rather than allowing her circumstances to define her trajectory, Tanisha had thrown her energy into her education. She was a young woman who took her studies with the utmost seriousness, possessing not only academic brilliance but also a warmth and an infectious smile that made her instantly memorable. The directions from the back seat led the detectives past the manicured front lawns of the complex, winding deep into the rear parking lot. One of the passengers pointed toward a commercial dumpster sitting quietly near the edge of the property. Fearing the worst, Investigator Miller stepped out of the vehicle and approached the heavy metal container. The metallic scent of garbage and sun-baked asphalt hung in the air. When he peered over the rim, however, he found only emptiness. There were no obvious human remains, no discarded clothing, nothing to indicate that a young life had ended in this bleak receptacle. The empty dumpster felt like a cruel joke, another dead end in an investigation that was fast becoming a labyrinth of contradictions. The search for Tanisha Stewart was about to reveal a sordid story dripping with obsession, control, and ultimately an act of violence that shook the local community to its core. To understand how Tanisha arrived at this tragic juncture, the investigators had to look backward to the year 2005. At the age of 17, while working part-time at a local pizza parlor, Tanisha had met a young man named Timothy Shepard. Timothy was 25 years old, an 8-year age gap that initially caused Tanisha's family to hesitate. Timothy was handsome, articulate, and persistent. He pursued Tanisha with quiet determination, asking her out repeatedly until she finally agreed to a date. What began as a simple workplace acquaintance quickly deepened into a serious, intense relationship. Timothy positioned himself as both a boyfriend and a supportive, older guide, helping her family with household chores, fixing television sets, and repairing computers. To Tanisha's mother and siblings, Timothy seemed like a blessing, a reliable figure who had embraced them as his own. The dynamics of the relationship began to shift, however, when Tanisha achieved a milestone that would change the course of her life. She earned a scholarship to Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. The campus in College Station was nearly 2 hours away from her home in Houston, while Tanisha was determined to maintain her bond with Timothy. The distance introduced a new element of independence into her life. Just 3 months into her first semester, Timothy abruptly ended the relationship to return to an old girlfriend, leaving Tanisha devastated. Yet, almost as soon as he had walked away, Timothy realized his error. He drove to College Station to surprise her, pleading for another chance. Tanisha, still harboring deep feelings for him, agreed to reconcile. But the young woman who returned to the relationship was not the same teenager Timothy had met at the pizza restaurant. College had broadened Tanisha's horizons. She was meeting new people, experiencing new ideas, and discovering a sense of personal autonomy that did not sit well with Timothy's desire for control. The cracks in their foundation began to widen. When Tanisha came home to Houston for her spring break in March of 2007, the tension reached a boiling point. She was eager to see her friends and attend a concert featuring the performer Beyoncé. Timothy, however, interpreted her desire to spend time with others as a personal affront. He began demanding her undivided attention, questioning her schedule, and monitoring her phone calls. A few days before the concert, Tanisha's sister, Gayla, experienced a vivid and unsettling nightmare. In the dream, Tanisha was attacked by jealous individuals, and her body could not be found. When Gayla shared this premonition, Tanisha smiled warmly, telling her sister to remain calm and promising that she would be perfectly safe. On Sunday, March 18th, Gayla returned home from church to find a series of frantic missed calls from her mother. When she answered, her mother asked if she had spoken to Tanisha. No one had heard from the 19-year-old since Thursday morning. She had failed to appear for the concert. Her phone was ringing directly to voicemail, and her friends had no knowledge of her whereabouts. For 36 hours, the family launched a desperate, informal search, checking local hospitals and contacting law enforcement agencies to report her missing. By Monday, March 19th, a formal missing persons report was filed, and investigators began tracing Tanisha's final known movements. Because Timothy Shepard was one of the last people to have seen her, detectives invited him to the station for an interview. Timothy arrived cooperative and seemingly concerned. He explained that he had picked Tanisha up early on Thursday morning around 3 a.m. and brought her back to his apartment. During the drive, she had received a phone call from a male college friend named Mark Marks. Timothy admitted to investigators that the call had upset him. When they arrived at his apartment, he confronted her about the identity of the caller. Tanisha, exhausted and frustrated by his constant jealousy, refused to discuss the matter, stating they could talk in the morning. When they woke hours later, Timothy pressed the issue again. According to Timothy's initial statement, Tanisha became angry, stormed out of the apartment on foot, and had not been seen since. Although Timothy's story was delivered with a calm, steady demeanor, detectives sought to verify his claims. Timothy voluntarily provided written consent for a search of his apartment. When investigators processed the residence, they found no obvious signs of a struggle, no blood, and no physical evidence of a crime. With no legal grounds to detain him, the police returned his keys and turned their attention to the other man in Tanisha's life, Mark Marks. Mark was a 19-year-old college student who cooperated fully with the authorities. Under questioning, he admitted that he and Tanisha had been dating for about a month. He was aware of Timothy's existence, but believed Tanisha was preparing to end a relationship with her older boyfriend. Mark's alibi for the period of Tanisha's disappearance was ironclad. He had been traveling with friends to South Padre Island for spring break, a claim verified by multiple witnesses and travel records. With Mark cleared, investigators began to consider the terrifying possibility that Tanisha had been abducted by a stranger after walking away from Timothy's apartment. They expanded their search grid, combing the heavily wooded areas surrounding the apartment complex. As volunteers and police dogs moved through the thick brush, local residents began reporting an unusual detail about Timothy's behavior in the days following Tanisha's disappearance. Neighbors noted that Timothy had spent nearly the entire weekend after Thursday, March 15th, engaged in an intense, continuous outdoor barbecue. He had 2 large grills operating at one point, producing a thick, dark smoke so overwhelming that neighbors eventually called the fire department, fearing he would set the building on fire. When firefighters and police officers had responded to the scene, Timothy explained that he was preparing a large quantity of meat for an upcoming church picnic of nearly 200 people. One firefighter reported seeing what appeared to be ribs soaking in a bathtub filled with water inside the apartment. Another resident reported a second peculiar observation. Timothy had been seen pouring large quantities of liquid bleach onto his outdoor patio, scrubbed with such intensity that the chemical fumes caused the neighbors' eyes to water. The mounting reports of Timothy's erratic behavior caught the attention of local community activist Quan Nell-X. Contacted by Tanisha's desperate family, Quan Nell agreed to intervene. Timothy's family had also reached out to the activist, claiming the police were attempting to frame Timothy for a crime he did not commit. Quan Nell arranged a private meeting with Timothy at his apartment. When he arrived, he found Timothy in a state of extreme agitation, sweating and pacing the floor, paranoically believing the apartment was wired with police listening devices. Timothy insisted they speak in the bathroom. Inside the small, tiled room, Quan Nell looked Timothy in the eyes and asked him directly if he had harmed Tanisha. Timothy put his head down, the weight of his actions finally breaking through his defensive facade.
He confessed that when
Tanisha had refused to discuss her relationship with Mark Marks, he had flown into a violent rage and strangled her to death. He then claimed he had placed her body in the complex's dumpster. Quan Nell immediately contacted investigator Miller and facilitated a peaceful surrender. However, when the police and a crime scene investigation team returned to the dumpster, they found it empty. It had been emptied by sanitation services earlier that week, and its contents had already been transferred to a massive regional landfill. A search of the landfill was deemed practically impossible, estimated to cost over $500,000 with a highly improbable chance of recovery. Tanisha's family, showing remarkable grace under pressure, requested that the county not waste public funds on a hopeless search. Without a body, prosecutors knew that securing a conviction for murder would be an uphill battle. They returned to Timothy's apartment with advanced forensic tools, searching for microscopic evidence that might have survived the bleach. The meticulous search yielded small but vital clues. In the kitchen garbage, Disposal. Crime scene technicians discovered tiny, charred bone fragments and a small piece of tooth enamel. Forensic analysis confirmed that the enamel belonged to Tanisha Stewart. Additional bone fragments were recovered from the soil surrounding the outdoor grill area. The horrifying truth began to take shape. Timothy had not simply placed her in a dumpster. He had dismembered her body in his bathtub and incinerated her remains, using his outdoor smokers, attempting to erase all physical trace of her existence. The trial of Timothy Shepard began on September 29, 2008. The prosecution presented the tooth enamel found in the disposal, the testimony of Quannell X, and a shocking statement from Timothy's own cousin, Nicholas Shepard. Nicholas testified that Timothy had previously joked that if a woman ever tried to leave him, he would dismember her and boil her remains. Timothy took the stand during the sentencing phase, claiming that Tanisha had attacked him with a knife during their argument and that he had acted in self-defense, blacking out during the struggle. He admitted under cross-examination that he had disposed of her body using his smoker, rather than a traditional barbecue grill. The jury was not swayed by his claims of self-defense. Timothy Shepard was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 99 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. While the conviction could never restore the bright future that had been stolen from Tanisha Stewart, it ensured that her killer would spend the remainder of his life behind concrete walls, a somber monument to the devastating consequences of possessive obsession. Chapter 2. In January of the year 2008, a different tragedy began to unfold. Along the frozen margins of Interstate 540 in Raleigh, North Carolina, on the morning of Wednesday, January 30th, at approximately 7:30, the early winter sun was struggling to pierce the gray morning mist. Commuters heading westbound on the busy highway noticed an unusual shape lying in the dry grass off the shoulder of the road. First responders arrived quickly, expecting to find the victim of a pedestrian traffic accident. Instead, they discovered the body of a young woman who had been subjected to a savage, personal attack. She had been stabbed upwards of 40 times about her face, her neck, her chest, and her torso. Her carotid artery and jugular vein had been severed, and her hands bore the deep, defensive wounds of someone who had fought desperately for her life. As the police began securing the scene with yellow tape, a commuter named Darren Curtis was driving to work along the same stretch of highway. Seeing the backed-up traffic and the blue tarp covering the victim, Darren felt a sudden chill of apprehension. Just half a mile further down the road, he spotted a white vehicle parked on the shoulder. It was a car that looked identical to the one driven by his wife, Latrice. Darren pulled over, his curiosity instantly transforming into sheer panic. He ran back toward the active crime scene, where detectives were able to confirm his worst fears. The young woman lying beneath the tarp was his 21-year-old wife, Latrice Curtis. Latrice was a business administration student at North Carolina Central University in nearby Durham. She was a popular, energetic young woman who had grown up in a protective home surrounded by older brothers. She had married Darren, a former National Guard soldier and accounting student, just 9 months prior. To her family and friends, Latrice was a young woman on the cusp of a beautiful, successful adult life. The investigation into her death began with her vehicle. Detectives examined the white car abandoned on the highway shoulder and found clear evidence of a struggle inside. The center console was shattered, and traces of blood were found on the driver's side door. Crime scene investigators recovered a foreign deoxyribonucleic acid sample from the steering wheel, which was sent to the state lab for urgent analysis. During his initial interview, Darren Curtis explained that he had last spoken to his wife at 10 o'clock the previous evening. Latrice had called to say she was running late from her classes and planned to grab some food before heading home. Darren had fallen asleep around 11:30, assuming she had decided to spend the night at her mother's house. When he awoke, his calls to her phone went straight to voicemail, prompting him to head to work along his normal route. A physical examination of Darren revealed no scratches, bruises, or defensive marks that would suggest participation in a violent struggle. A voluntary search of his home and vehicle yielded no evidence, and investigators quickly ruled him out as a suspect. An autopsy of Latrice's body revealed a critical clue. A condom was recovered from her vaginal canal, indicating she had engaged in sexual intercourse shortly before her death. There were no physical signs of sexual assault or trauma to her genital region, suggesting the encounter had been consensual. Detectives subpoenaed the couple's telephone records and discovered a flurry of calls exchanged between Latrice's phone and an unfamiliar number around midnight. On the night of her disappearance, the number was registered to a young man named Stephen Randolph. Stephen was a well-known figure on the North Carolina Central University campus. He was a talented basketball player with realistic aspirations of playing in the National Basketball Association. 2 days after the murder, Stephen walked into the Wake County Sheriff's Office accompanied by his roommate, a prominent local minister named Pastor Robert Reeves. Under initial questioning, Stephen claimed that he and Latrice were merely classmates who occasionally studied together. However, when presented with the telephone records and the findings of the autopsy, Stephen confessed that they had been engaged in a passionate, secret affair. He admitted that Latrice had visited his apartment on the night of the murder and that they had engaged in sexual intercourse. During the encounter, the condom had become lodged inside her. Stephen claimed that Latrice had left his apartment around 10 o'clock at night to return home to her husband. Shortly after her departure, Stephen claimed he had driven to the home of his primary girlfriend, Velma Newton, where he stayed until approximately 1 o'clock in the morning. He insisted that during his drive, Latrice had called him repeatedly, frantic about the possibility of becoming pregnant from the lost condom. He denied any involvement in her death. To verify Stephen's claims, detectives interviewed Pastor Robert Reeves. The 43-year-old minister known in the community as a charismatic motivational speaker, confirmed that Latrice had visited Stephen at their shared home on the evening of January 29th. Reeves claimed he had left for a church service at 8:15 in the evening and returned around 11:30, noting that both Stephen's and Latrice's cars were gone. Reeves also mentioned that Stephen possessed a collection of decorative knives and swords in his room, a detail that immediately interested investigators given the nature of Latrice's wounds. A search of Stephen's car and belongings, however, failed to produce a murder weapon or any blood evidence. Furthermore, Stephen's girlfriend, Velma Newton, confirmed his alibi, stating he had arrived at her home around 10 o'clock and stayed past midnight. Velma also revealed that both she and Stephen had been receiving anonymous, threatening telephone calls from an unknown individual who seemed desperate to disrupt their relationship. On one occasion, all four of Stephen's car tires had been slashed outside her apartment. The breakthrough in the case came from a routine highway patrol log. State Trooper Isaac Cooper contacted detectives to report that at approximately 1:30 on the morning of January 30th, he had spotted a disabled vehicle parked on the shoulder of Interstate 540 eastbound with its hazard lights flashing. When the trooper ran the registration of the abandoned vehicle, it did not return to Stephen Randolph or Latrice Curtis. The car belonged to Pastor Robert Reeves. With this new information, detectives requested another interview with the minister. They noticed several fresh, deep scratches on Reeves's hands and arms. When asked to explain the injuries, Reeves claimed he had scraped himself while helping Stephen move a wooden desk. However, when questioned separately, Stephen had no memory of any such accident or injury. Investigators subpoenaed Pastor Reeves's telephone records and discovered that the blocked, anonymous threat sent to Stephen and Velma had originated from Reeves's personal cell phone. A deeper investigation into the pastor's background revealed a hidden history of predatory behavior and sexual obsession. Reeves had become intensely infatuated with his young roommate, Stephen Randolph. He had previously attempted to proposition Stephen, offering to waive his rent in exchange for sexual favors, an advance that Stephen had rejected. The pastor's jealousy had intensified as he watched Stephen pursue relationships with women, particularly Latrice. The final piece of the puzzle came from the state crime laboratory. The deoxyribonucleic acid recovered from the steering wheel of Latrice's abandoned car was a match for Pastor Robert Reeves. The prosecution's theory of the crime was both tragic and bizarre. On the night of January 29th, Robert Reeves had watched Latrice visit Stephen's room. Consumed by a jealous, obsessive rage, he had followed her as she drove home along Interstate 540. Using his status as a well-known community minister, he had managed to convince her to pull over to the shoulder of the highway. Once she was stopped, Reeves had attacked her inside her vehicle, stabbing her repeatedly before dragging her body into the grass. He then drove her car a half-mile down the road to distance it from the crime scene, abandoning his own vehicle in his haste to escape the area. The trial of Robert Reeves began on September 29, 2009. The defense argued that Stephen Randolph was the true killer, pointing to the fact that Stephen's deoxyribonucleic acid was recovered from beneath Latrice's fingernails. The prosecution successfully countered that this genetic material was the result of their consensual sexual encounter earlier that evening, whereas the presence of the pastor's genetic material on her steering wheel could not be explained by innocent contact. On October 9, 2009, the jury found Robert Reeves guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, bringing a somber end to a case where a young woman's life was sacrificed to the delusions of a man hiding behind a collar of faith. Chapter 3. The final chapter in this trilogy of tragic obsession occurred in the small, close-knit community of Little Elm, Texas, during the winter of 2004. On the morning of Saturday, December 11th, at approximately 4 in the morning, the night manager of a hotel in Gainesville, Texas, responded to a distressed, slurring voice on the internal telephone system. The call had originated from room 1047. When the manager arrived at the door, he found it secured from the inside with a heavy deadbolt. Assisted by a maintenance worker, the manager forced the door open, revealing a darkened room in complete disarray. Lying on the floor in a near-fetal position was a 44-year-old woman named Denise Miller. She was bleeding heavily from a single gunshot wound to her head located just above her right eye. Beside her on the carpet lay a small .25 caliber handgun, a bottle of alcohol, and several over-the-counter sleeping pills. Denise was alive but disoriented, her speech slurred and incoherent. She was rushed by emergency medical technicians to a nearby trauma facility. The discovery of Denise in Gainesville was the climax of a 24-hour search that had begun in Little Elm, a peaceful suburb of Dallas. The previous morning, Friday, December 10th, a 6-year veteran of the Little Elm Police Department named Wayne Irby had failed to report for his scheduled 6 o'clock morning shift. Wayne was a popular, dedicated officer who loved his community and was known for his friendly, outgoing nature. When he did not arrive for the morning briefing and failed to return calls, his colleagues grew concerned. By noon, Chief Whalen Rhodes dispatched officers to conduct a welfare check at the residence Wayne shared with Denise Miller and her 2 teenage children, Whitney and Walter. The officers found the house empty, with no vehicles in the driveway. Neighbors and Denise's children confirmed that they had not seen either Denise or Wayne since the previous afternoon. Whitney, Denise's daughter, mentioned receiving a strange, emotional telephone call from her mother around midnight, in which Denise told her she loved her and instructed the children to prepare themselves for school the next morning. Anxious for their colleagues' safety, Officer Jerry Walker, Wayne's partner on the force, decided to check a small rental home that Wayne had recently leased. During a brief separation from Denise, using a key obtained from the landlord, Officer Walker and Officer James Wynn entered the residence. In the kitchen, they found Wayne's personal fanny pack and his mobile phone sitting on the counter. Down the hallway, Officer Wynn stopped and gasped, instructing Walker to stay back. Lying face down on the floor of the bedroom was Officer Wayne Irby. He had been shot once in the back of the head. There were no signs of a struggle or forced entry, suggesting he had been caught entirely off guard by someone he trusted. The investigation quickly centered on Denise Miller. While checking her main residence, detectives recovered a handwritten note in the master bedroom. The letter, written by Denise, was filled with despair, suggesting she was preparing to end her life. On the kitchen counter of Wayne's rental home, investigators found a second, more explicit note. It read, "I am sorry I took both of our lives. Please contact our moms." A search of the Little Elm police uniforms in Wayne's closet revealed that his duty belt was hanging on the wall, but his .40 caliber service weapon was missing from its holster. As investigators reconstructed the couple's history, they discovered a volatile relationship defined by intense jealousy. Denise, a divorced mother who had relocated to Texas for a fresh start, had met Wayne during a routine neighborhood patrol. The two had fallen quickly in love, but Denise was constantly tormented by suspicions that Wayne was utilizing his position on the force to meet other women. In December of 2003, Denise had filed a domestic violence complaint against Wayne, claiming he had assaulted her. The incident began when she discovered another woman's belongings inside his rental house. Although she later withdrew the complaint, admitting she had initiated the physical confrontation out of anger, the event left a permanent scar on the relationship. In November of 2004, after Denise lost her employment, the couple attempted to reconcile, and Wayne moved back into her home. However, the old patterns of behavior quickly resurfaced. On the day before his murder, Wayne had confided in a close friend that he was planning to end the relationship permanently and move back to his rental home. When Denise was found alive in her Gainesville hotel room, detectives recovered Wayne's missing .40 caliber service weapon. An examination of the pistol revealed that Denise had attempted to load a cartridge into the chamber backward, causing the mechanism to jam. Unable to use the larger weapon, she had used her stepfather's .25 caliber handgun to shoot herself in the head. In the hotel room, investigators recovered a third, lengthy suicide note. In this document, Denise claimed that she had accidentally shot Wayne during an argument and had fled the scene in a panic. Texas Ranger Tracy Murphy attempted to interview Denise at her hospital bedside. The trauma of the self-inflicted gunshot wound had caused severe cognitive damage. Denise was partially paralyzed, blind in one eye, and claimed to have no memory of the shooting or her subsequent flight to Gainesville. While she could recall details of her past life and her relationship with Wayne, the events of December 9th and 10th were entirely missing from her memory. Despite her claim of amnesia, ballistics confirmed that the .25 caliber bullet recovered from Wayne's head had been fired from the handgun found beside Denise. The trigger pressure of the weapon was tested and found to require nearly 5 pounds of force, refuting the defense's claim that the weapon had discharged accidentally. Denise Miller was charged with murder and declared competent to stand trial. After 18 months of medical rehabilitation, the trial commenced on July 10, 2006. The prosecution presented the 3 handwritten notes as a clear, sequential confession, arguing that Denise had traveled to Wayne's home with a loaded firearm, confronted him about his plans to leave her, and executed him when he refused to comply. Her failure to call for medical assistance after the shooting was presented as definitive proof of her homicidal intent. The jury found Denise Miller guilty of murder after less than 1 hour of deliberation. Given her severe physical disabilities, she was spared the death penalty and sentenced to 62 years in prison, ensuring she would spend the remainder of her life under the custody of the state. These 3 cases, though separated by geography and time, stand as a solemn warning of the destructive power of human obsession. They remind us that justice, though sometimes slow, remains an unyielding force, dedicated to speaking for those whose voices have been prematurely silenced. The silence of Gainesville and the tragedy in Little Elm. On the 11th of December in the year 2004, the winter air in the small city of Gainesville, Texas, carried a cold, heavy silence. It was a quiet community, the sort of place where residents sought peace and predictability. But shortly past 4 in the morning, that peace was shattered for the night. Manager of a local hotel. The front desk telephone rang, carrying an urgent, disoriented voice from one of the guest rooms. It was a plea for help, slurred and fading. Sensing immediate trouble, the manager walked down the dimly lit hallway to investigate. He stood outside the door of room 104, knocking. Firmly, he called out, asking if the occupant was safe, but there was no coherent response, only faint, muffled sounds from within. The deadbolt was securely engaged, preventing the manager from using his master key. Understanding that time was of the essence, the manager contacted the maintenance technician, who arrived quickly with the necessary tools to force the door open. When the lock finally gave way and the door swung open into the darkened room, the 2 men stepped into a scene of quiet devastation. Lying on the floor in a crumpled, fetal position was a woman, alone and severely injured. The room was in a state of disarray, suggesting a quiet struggle or a frantic search. The woman was slurring her words, clearly in a state of deep shock. As the manager approached to assist, he noticed a significant head injury just above her eye, the unmistakable mark of a gunshot wound. Lying on the carpet mere inches from her hand was a .25 caliber handgun. The manager immediately contacted emergency services, requesting urgent medical assistance. Within minutes, the quiet street outside was illuminated by the flashing lights of police cruisers and an ambulance. For the responding officers of the Gainesville Police Department, the scene was chaotic. Their primary responsibility was to preserve life, and they worked quickly alongside the arriving emergency medical technicians to stabilize the woman. She was rushed to a nearby trauma center where physicians began a desperate fight to save her life. The bullet had penetrated her skull, and her survival remained highly uncertain. Meanwhile, investigators began the meticulous process of examining the hotel room. They found a bottle of alcohol, several packages of over-the-counter sleeping medication, and personal items scattered across the bed. Because there was no one else present in the room and the deadbolt had been locked from the inside, investigators had to consider two primary possibilities. Either the woman had attempted to take her own life, or someone had attacked her and managed to escape through a window or prior to the door being secured. The mystery deepened significantly when investigators ran the woman's identification. Her name was Denise Miller. The local database immediately flagged her name, revealing a highly disturbing connection. Denise and her boyfriend, a 37-year-old police officer named Wayne Irby, had been officially reported missing in the nearby town of Little Elm just 24 hours earlier. Wayne, a dedicated officer with a clean record, had failed to report for his scheduled 6 o'clock morning shift, an unprecedented absence that had raised immediate alarms among his colleagues. To understand how Denise Miller ended up in a Gainesville hotel room with a gunshot wound to her head, investigators had to piece together the events of the preceding 24 hours, retracing a path that would expose a complex relationship marked by affection, intense insecurity, and ultimate tragedy. Denise Wall had grown up in Kansas City, Missouri, where she was known as a popular, vibrant, and outgoing young woman. Friends recalled her as bubbly and warm, someone who dreamed of building a stable, loving family. At the age of 22, she married her college partner, and together they welcomed 2 children, a daughter named Whitney and a son named Walter. However, as the years passed, the marriage began to fail, culminating in a divorce in 1995. Seeking a fresh start for herself and her children, Denise, then 36 years old, packed their belongings and moved to Little Elm, Texas, a close-knit suburb of Dallas. She was determined to build a successful life. She secured a position with a local beverage distributor and managed her finances diligently, eventually building a beautiful new home for her family. To outside observers, her life seemed complete, but she still hoped to find a reliable partner with whom to share her success. In the year 2003, that hope seemed to materialize in an unexpected way. Denise answered a knock at her front door to find Officer Wayne Irby standing on her porch. Wayne, a 6-year veteran of the Little Elm Police Department, was performing a routine neighborhood watch check. He noticed her garage door had been left open and politely advised her to close it to prevent theft. He handed her his business card, offering his assistance should she ever need it. Wayne was a well-respected figure in the community, known as an officer who genuinely loved his profession. His colleagues often remarked that he bled blue, meaning his commitment to law enforcement was a central part of his identity. It was not long before Wayne returned to Denise's home, this time on a personal matter, asking her out for dinner and a movie. The attraction was mutual, and they quickly became an exclusive couple. Initially, the relationship was warm and promising. Wayne bonded well with Denise's children, and they began to live as a blended family. However, beneath the surface of their domestic happiness, a persistent pattern of insecurity began to emerge. Wayne was a friendly, outgoing man who interacted with many people on his daily patrol beat. Denise began to suspect that his friendly demeanor with other women was a sign of infidelity. She confronted him repeatedly, but Wayne maintained that his interactions were strictly professional and that he remained entirely committed to her. The constant accusations began to erode the trust between them. By the spring of 2004, they attempted to put their differences aside, and later that year, they made the significant decision to purchase a home together. Yet, living under the same roof did not resolve their underlying issues. The arguments regarding trust and jealousy intensified, leading Wayne to make the difficult decision to separate. He moved into a small rental home across town. The separation was painful and emotional for both of them. However, in November of that year, Denise unexpectedly lost her employment. Wayne, concerned for the well-being of Denise and her children, chose to reconcile with her, wishing to ensure they had financial and emotional support during a difficult period. They attempted to rebuild their relationship, but the fragile peace was destined to be short-lived. On the morning of December 10th, 2004, the morning briefing room at the Little Elm Police Department was filled with officers preparing for their shifts. One seat remained empty, the seat belonging to Wayne Irby. When Wayne failed to arrive by 7 in the morning and did not answer his telephone, his colleagues became deeply concerned. Wayne was an incredibly punctual officer who took his duties seriously. His partner, Jerry Walker, and fellow officer Cynthia Medrano expressed their worries to the police chief, Waylon Rhodes. Chief Rhodes dispatched officers to Denise's residence to conduct a welfare check. Upon arrival, the officers found the house quiet. There were no vehicles in the driveway, and the doors were locked. No one answered their knocks. Later that morning, investigators contacted Denise's children, Whitney and Walter, as they returned from school. The children revealed that they had not seen their mother or Wayne since the previous evening. Whitney recalled receiving a brief, unusual telephone call from her mother. Around midnight, Denise had stated she was running errands, told Whitney she loved her, and advised the children to prepare themselves for school in the morning. This behavior was highly uncharacteristic of Denise, who is typically a highly attentive and protective mother. With both Wayne and Denise missing, the search intensified. Detective Jerry Walker and Officer James decided to check the rental property that Wayne had briefly occupied during their separation. They obtained a key from the property owner and entered the quiet house. As they walked through the rooms, calling out Wayne's name, they made an ominous discovery on the kitchen counter: Wayne's personal fanny pack and his mobile telephone were lying there for an active police officer, leaving his primary communication device behind was an incredibly grave sign. Moments later, Officer Wynn walked down the short hallway toward the back of the
house.
He stopped suddenly, taking a sharp breath, and instructed Detective Walker to remain back. Lying on the floor was Wayne Irby.
He had sustained a
fatal gunshot wound to the back of his head. There were no signs of a struggle or forced entry, suggesting he had been caught completely off guard. The discovery shifted the missing person case into a homicide investigation. Investigators from the Denton County Sheriff's Office and the Texas Rangers were called to process the scene. The location of the wound indicated that Wayne had been shot from behind, likely by someone he knew and trusted. His service weapon, a .40 caliber pistol, was missing from his duty belt, which still hung in his closet at Denise's house. Given Denise's sudden disappearance and the history of tension in their relationship, investigators had to consider her as a person of interest. When detectives searched the home that Wayne and Denise shared, they discovered two highly significant pieces of evidence. The first was a handwritten note from Denise, indicating deep emotional distress and a contemplation of ending her own life. The second note, found on the kitchen island of Wayne's rental home, was even more direct. It was a brief message from Denise, apologizing to their families and stating that she had taken both of their lives. These discoveries suggested a tragic sequence of events, a homicide followed by an attempted suicide. The urgent task was now to locate Denise before she could cause further harm to herself or others. That answer arrived at 4 in the morning on December 11th, when the Gainesville Police Department reported finding her in the hotel room with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. At the hospital, physicians worked to stabilize Denise. The bullet had caused severe trauma to her brain, affecting her cognitive and physical abilities. Despite her critical condition, Texas Ranger Tracy Murphy sought permission to speak with her, hoping to obtain a statement before her prognosis worsened. During the recorded bedside interview, Denise appeared deeply disoriented.
When
asked about the events in Little Elm, she claimed to have no memory of what had transpired. When Ranger Murphy informed her that Wayne was dead, she reacted with apparent shock, denying that she had caused him any harm. She could recall details of her life prior to the incident, and she was aware of her surroundings. After waking in a hospital, but the critical window of time surrounding Wayne's death was entirely absent from her memory. Medical professionals noted that the combination of severe head trauma, alcohol, and medication could indeed cause significant retrograde amnesia. However, investigators remained skeptical, wondering if her memory loss was a conscious effort to avoid responsibility for a terrible act. As Denise began a long 18-month process of physical rehabilitation, she remained under close medical and legal supervision. The bullet had left her partially blind and paralyzed on one side of her body, confined to a wheelchair. In January of 2005, the official autopsy and ballistics reports were completed. The analysis confirmed that Wayne Irby had been killed by a single .25 caliber bullet, which matched the handgun found beside Denise in the Gainesville hotel room. The weapon was registered to Denise's stepfather. This detail suggested premeditation. She had obtained the weapon from her family prior to confronting Wayne at his rental home. On the 10th of July, 2006, the trial of the state of Texas versus Denise Miller began at the Denton County Courthouse. Denise appeared in the courtroom in a frail, weakened state, seated in a wheelchair. The prosecution cautioned the jury not to let her physical limitations sway their judgment, emphasizing that her injuries were the direct result of her own actions after she had taken the life of a dedicated public servant. The prosecution presented the handwritten notes as clear evidence of her intent. They argued that Denise, driven by an overwhelming fear of abandonment and intense jealousy, had traveled to Wayne's home with the loaded .25 caliber handgun, confronted him, and shot him when he refused to continue the relationship. To counter the defense's argument that the shooting was a tragic accident, the prosecution introduced evidence from the state crime lab.
Testing
Revealed that the firearm required approximately 5 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger, making an accidental discharge highly improbable. Furthermore, the prosecution noted that if the shooting had been an accident, Denise's natural response would have been to summon medical assistance immediately, rather than writing confession notes and fleeing the scene. The defense maintained that the notes were the writings of a deeply troubled woman who had panicked after a tragic accident. They pointed to the line in her hotel note where she claimed she did not mean to hurt him. However, the jury found the weight of the evidence, including the physical mechanics of the weapon and the trajectory of the wound, to be convincing. After less than 1 hour of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder. During the sentencing phase, the jury chose to show a measure of leniency regarding the absolute maximum penalty, taking into account her permanent physical disabilities. Denise Miller was sentenced to 62 years in prison, a sentence that ensured she would spend the remainder of her life reflecting on the consequences of a tragic loss of trust. The tragedy of Tanisha Stewart. In March of the year 2007, another quiet tragedy began to unfold. In the city of Houston, Texas, on the afternoon of Wednesday, March 21st, investigator Sidney Miller of the Harris County Sheriff's Office was driving toward an apartment complex north of the city. In the back seat of his vehicle sat a community activist and a young man who claimed to have direct knowledge of a missing person's location. The missing person was Tanisha Stewart, a 19-year-old college freshman who had vanished 6 days prior, on the 15th of March. On the passenger's instructions, investigator Miller pulled into the parking lot of the apartment complex and approached a large commercial dumpster near the back of the property. The passenger pointed to the container, suggesting that Tanisha's Remains would be found inside. When the investigators looked inside, they found the dumpster entirely empty.
It
had been recently serviced. The realization brought a cold wave of frustration to the detectives. They were standing at what appeared to be a dead end in a case that was rapidly growing more sinister. To find Tanisha, they would have to untangle a complex web of youthful ambition, extreme possessiveness, and a betrayal that would shock the entire community. Tanisha Stewart was a young woman of remarkable potential, raised in one of Houston's most economically challenged neighborhoods. She was one of 6 children. Her father had passed away when she was young, leaving her mother to raise the family under difficult circumstances. Despite her surroundings, Tanisha excelled academically, dedicating herself to her studies and earning a prestigious scholarship to Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. Her family viewed her as a bright, shining star, someone destined to achieve great
things.
In May of 2005, while working a part-time job at a local pizza restaurant, 17-year-old Tanisha met 25-year-old Timothy Shepard. Timothy was handsome and attentive, and although there was an 8-year age difference between them, Tanisha was drawn to his mature demeanor. Initially, her family was cautious, questioning the motives of an older man pursuing a teenager. However, Timothy made a conscious effort to win their trust, spending time at their home, assisting with household repairs, and presenting himself as a responsible, caring partner. The relationship deepened quickly, but the dynamic changed significantly when Tanisha moved to the university campus, located nearly 2 hours away from Houston. For the first time, Tanisha experienced independence. She made new friends, joined academic groups, and began to see a world beyond her old neighborhood. Timothy, remaining in Houston, struggled with her growing independence. His behavior became increasingly possessive. He would call her repeatedly, demand to know her whereabouts, and occasionally drive to the university campus unannounced to monitor her activities. During her first semester, the tension led to a temporary breakup, during which Timothy briefly dated another woman. He quickly regretted the decision and sought to reconcile with Tanisha. She agreed to give the relationship another chance, but her focus had shifted. She was no longer the dependent teenager he had met. She was a focused college student with a clear vision for her future. During her spring break in March of 2007, Tanisha returned to Houston. While she made plans to see Timothy, she also spent time with her childhood friends and planned to attend a major concert in the city. Her sister, Gayla Taylor, noticed that Tanisha seemed cautious around Timothy, as if trying to balance his intense expectations with her desire to enjoy her break. Gayla even experienced a disturbing nightmare during this period, dreaming that something terrible had happened to her sister, a premonition she shared with Tanisha, who gently brushed it aside, promising she would be safe. On Sunday, March 18th, Gayla returned from a church service to find several missed calls from her mother. When she returned the call, she learned that no one had heard from Tanisha since Thursday. Tanisha had failed to show up. For the concert with her friends, her mobile telephone was turned off, and her social media accounts were inactive. It was completely unlike Tanisha to cut off communication with her family, and an immediate sense of dread settled over the household. The family filed a missing persons report on Monday, March 19th. Investigators began by identifying the last individuals to have contact with Tanisha. Timothy Shepard was brought to the station for questioning. He cooperated with the detectives, explaining that he had picked Tanisha up early. On Thursday morning, March 15th, he claimed that while they were in his vehicle, Tanisha received a telephone call from a young man named Mark Marks, a college acquaintance she had spent time with earlier that night. Timothy admitted that the call had upset him, sparking an argument when they arrived at his apartment. According to Timothy, they decided to sleep and address the issue the following morning. When they woke, the argument resumed. Timothy claimed that Tanisha became frustrated with his questions, gathered her belongings, and walked out of the apartment, leaving on foot. He maintained that he had not seen or heard from her since that moment. Timothy provided written consent for investigators to search his apartment. The initial search was conducted by patrol officers who did not observe any obvious signs of a physical struggle or blood loss. Without sufficient evidence to detain him, investigators had to release Timothy, continuing their search for other leads. They turned their attention to Mark Marks, the young man who had called Tanisha. On Thursday morning, Mark was cooperative and provided a consistent statement. He explained that he and Tanisha had recently begun a romantic relationship at university. Tanisha had expressed a desire to enter a relationship with Timothy, wanting to transition, help her life forward without the constant drama and possessiveness. Mark provided a verified alibi, proving he was traveling with friends to a beach destination for spring break at the time of Tanisha's disappearance. Investigators ruled him out as a suspect. With no other immediate leads, detectives faced the terrifying possibility that Tanisha had been abducted by a stranger after leaving Timothy's apartment. They organized search parties, utilizing canine units to scour the heavily wooded areas surrounding the apartment complex. During the search, a neighbor approached investigators with a troubling detail. She recalled hearing loud noises and what sounded like a disturbance near the wood line on the night of Tanisha's disappearance, but a thorough search of the woods yielded no evidence. However, as investigators continued to speak with residents of the apartment complex, a consistent and highly unusual pattern of behavior emerged regarding Timothy Shepard. Multiple neighbors reported that on the Friday and Saturday following Tanisha's disappearance, Timothy had been engaged in an extraordinary amount of outdoor cooking. He had set up multiple grills on his patio, producing a massive, uncontrollable amount of smoke that had prompted neighbors to contact the fire department. When firefighters had arrived to address the smoke, Timothy had claimed he was preparing food for an upcoming church gathering of nearly 200 people. The firefighters noted that he had a significant amount of meat, and one responder recalled seeing what appeared to be raw portions stored in his bathtub. Additionally, another neighbor reported seeing Timothy scrubbing his concrete patio with an exceptionally strong solution of bleach, so potent that the fumes irritated her eyes. This behavior, combined with Timothy's history of intense jealousy and physical control, caused investigators to focus their attention back on him. Her family, desperate for answers, reached out to community activist Quan Nell X, asking for his assistance in pressure for the truth. Quan Nell, who had also been contacted by Timothy's family to ensure his rights were protected, arranged a private meeting with Timothy at his apartment. The meeting took place in the apartment's small bathroom, where Timothy felt safe from potential surveillance. Quan Nell spoke to Timothy as a mentor, urging him to be honest. Timothy was visibly trembling, expressing a deep fear of the legal consequences of his actions. Under quiet questioning, Timothy broke down. He confessed that when Tanisha had attempted to leave his apartment, he had lost control, attacking her and strangling her to death. Timothy claimed that in a panic, he had placed her body in the apartment complex dumpster. Quan